right. So today is June 12th, 2019. Wow. And we're going to be doing a hand analysis reading. So let's start by setting the energy of the reading. I'm going to say a reading prayer. So as we do this reading, we allow the cosmic and the earth energies to flow through our bodies, opening the doors which we become more aware of our spirituality and increase our communication with the God of our heart. Let us pray. May it be with the blessings of the Supreme Being that whatever happens during this reading will benefit each of us in our spiritual growth, awareness, and understanding. Amen. Okay, so let's talk about hand analysis. Hand analysis has kind of two main components to it. So you have your soul psychology, which is in your fingerprints, and that is unchanging. So the fingerprints that you were given, I guess, 5 months prior to birth are unchanging, right? The FBI can identify you with just one fingerprint. So they're very, very, very unique. And soul psychology is what's in the fingerprints. So your life purpose, what you came here to be and to do. And it's always going to be a state of consciousness. It's not so much what you're doing. The format is kind of secondary. It's that the state of consciousness that whatever you're doing is what you're inhabiting. So it's a state of consciousness rather than, I need to do this type of work or this type of job. And then you have, your life purpose, your life lesson, so what you came here to work on. So it's kind of like the shadow self. If you were to kind of think about like a swimmer, your life purpose is like your strongest stroke, right? It's like what you are naturally really good at. And then the life lesson is kind of what you came here to work on. And you really can only take big steps up in your life purpose when you address the life lesson. So it's like you can't just come here to do what you're already good at. Right. You got to work on the shadow side too. And think of the life lesson as there's like layers, like an onion. It's just going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's always a process. It's never going to reach a certain goal where you're finally complete with your life lesson and its karma. It will just keep unfolding deeper and deeper and deeper. And then there's the overall theme or the school of that you're in, and that's kind of like the overall, I guess, if you're somewhere, it's the temperature of the water. So there isn't like one circumstance that doesn't revolve around your school that you're in. So in swimming, it's like the temperature of the water. Your life lesson is like your stroke that's the most weak, and your life purpose is what you're really good at. It's what you're kind of a natural at. Okay, so that's just soul psychology. Then I also look at the personality psychology, and that's kind of more in the hand shape, the lines, the fingers, the dominant fingers and stuff like that. And I kind of combine it together. So it's not just one or the other. And I just want to make sure, so this is thumbprint, right? These were thumbs. Okay, cool.
Yes, it should
Cool, that's perfect. Perfect. Okay, that's what I got here.
That's what I meant to do.
Right. Okay, so you have some unique fingerprints. Loops. You have loops, so that's what these kind of fingerprints are. And this is kind of a higher ranking loop. And then you have two whorls kind of on your right thumb and your right Jupiter finger. So the thumb is kind of all about results in the world. You think about like taking an idea and taking it through to its full completion. That's going to be very important for you. I built 3 feet of fence today. Something that's like tangible, measurable. I did this with, this thing. I created this idea. I turned this idea into reality. I made this this house, or I built this fence. I made this cake or something. I created this play or something. And results in the world, and then you have the Jupiter life purpose also. So Jupiter is all about leadership, so kind of being enthroned, calling the shots, telling how people, kind of telling them what to do. You're kind of meant to be that person. Kind of think of it as like you have to kind of, it's Jupiter, Zeus, right? So he was sitting in the sky with the lightning bolts, he was kind of in charge. Right. So when you kind of put those together, you get what we call the big shot. Okay, so the big shot, I'm kind of skipping around your reading, but I wanted to go right to your life purpose. So it's called the big shot. And so it combines, the results in the world with the leadership skills. So it's kind of like setting really setting high standards for yourself, and then risking failure by putting yourself out there in the world. So basically rising to any prominence in any field, like CEO of a company, it could be like a coach or something where everyone's kind of looking up to you. But basically you have to kind of be in that position of authority, of power. And usually this life purpose takes a little bit longer to really step into those shoes. Usually, I think it's like midlife, it's like when you're like really avoiding positions of power and like, no, I don't want to, be in a leadership position. But that's where you're actually going to feel the most meaning and fulfillment in your life, is when you're actually calling the shots and like setting high standards for yourself. And then like risking failure by putting yourself at stake. So it's really kind of like, okay, I don't know if this new product I'm putting out there is going to take off, or if people are going to like this, piece of artwork that I put out there. But, it's like setting a really high standard for yourself. And then, the whole thing with big shot is like, who are you to think you're a big shot, right? You probably had to face that. And that part of yourself that feels like a little shot, right? That's like, oh, you don't feel like there's results happening in your life, or that you're taking a leadership role. So both sides of the coin have to kind of be grappled with. It's not like, you have to be at one extreme or the other, but there's definitely like a medium. Like when someone has like a really out there life purpose, like a spotlight life purpose, it's like an audience doesn't have to be like 4,000 people. It could be 4 people, right? It doesn't have to be this all or none type of thing, right? There's always gray area for that. And so, making sure you're not sabotaging your own success. And then, like, can you accept this role as a man of influence in the world? Can you, the thumbs are all about, when you get something in your thumb, it's all about, how can you kind of manipulate or change your surroundings to create something. They say dolphins actually have more gray matter in their brain, but they don't have thumbs, so they can't change anything. They can't rearrange the ocean floor, but they actually have, like, their brains are more developed than ours or something like that. So that's the thumbs. It's all about creating, manipulating their environment, changing things, and getting things done, turning your ideas into reality. Tangible, measurable results. If you can see the results, if you can see that you went from this point to this point and you can track the results, that's going to make you really happy. So you're happy when immersed in a project or learning new skills, using the skills that you've already learned, and then have your own enthusiasm, kind of energizing others. So I kind of wrote down, it's like CEO, entrepreneur, so being the one who kind of says how the results are going to be made, calling the shots, basically, having a say in how it turns out. Taking, like a producer or director of a creative project, seeing things through from conception to completion, or where everyone's kind of relying on you, where you're kind of like that figure where everyone's kind of looking up to you for that guidance. So some obstacles, have to do with, living someone else's movie, someone else's goals instead of your own, or relying on unreliable people. Stopping just short of success. So, when you're right at that point and then you give up, or like, it's not working, I'm going to give up, instead of pushing through to the end. So if you can kind of track this in your life, have you seen where you were able to kind of bring a project to its full completion, and how did that feel? And also those times where you were stopped at a certain point in the process of creating some sort of result, and what got in the way? How did it get sabotaged? Because this is going to be stuff that you'll be working with for the rest of your life. It has to do with this idea of, are you going to see this idea to its full completion, or will it get kind of stopped halfway or something like that? Will it, Where's that point, that threshold, where it just becomes too overwhelming, and you're just like, I can't. So those are good boundaries to know, and then remedying them. What can you do so that instead of it just being an automatic, unconscious, like, oh, I'm gonna quit this project even though you've invested this much time and energy into it. How can you kind of catch yourself so that it doesn't become an unconscious thing. Or another obstacle, instead of just stopping short of success, but being ruined by your success. So when you become very successful and ethics come into play and stuff like that, maybe money and stuff like that. The positives, focus, ambition, results. These are words I wrote down that are good mantras for you. Feelings of accomplishment. I like my work. I'm good at what I do. I enjoy the fruits of my labors. I take ideas and make them happen. My life purpose is at the center of what I do every day. You exercise initiative, reliability, and persistence. And then these are some things to watch out for: just scattered direction, unclear goals, logistical nightmares, feelings of failure. That's going to be there. But it's like with anything, there's always two sides of the coin: the good news and the bad news. There's good news and bad news for everything I'm going to look at. It's not just like, oh, this is what you're doing. It's more of, this is how you're wired to be, but it could go haywire.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's in your fingerprints. If it's in your hands, it's in your life. So it's up to you to kind of develop the consciousness to kind of track these things. So now that you're kind of getting to know what your life purpose is and what the map is, it's like starting to see like, oh, I see where this happened when I was a kid and I got sabotaged here and I let this happen here. So it's like, think of it as like you have this like karmic stuff that you're bringing into this lifetime and grappling with how to kind of navigate the waters. So it's not just one side, one extreme to the other, because most people will do that. They'll go from one extreme, high success to failure on the streets, no money, and they won't find that middle ground. And so it's because it's an unconscious thing. It's just like a flip-flop. It's either one or the other, when really there's a whole lot of gray area and a lot of middle ground. And it's like finding the middle path, I guess. Okay, I'm going to talk about the overall theme of your life. You have you got 8 worlds. So whenever you have 7 or above these worlds, you're in the school of love. Okay, so school of love is actually one of the most common schools in hand analysis, and it's all about being authentic. So using your heart as a compass. Emotional mastery, love, and closeness. So the first question I would say is, how are your relationships? That's going to be the number one thing with anyone in School of Love. How are your relationships doing? Not just your intimate relationships, how's your relationships with your family, your friends, stuff like that. That's going to be key as to the temperature of where you're at with your emotional system. So because you also have this HAL 9000 headline, HAL 9000 headline is a GIF marker headline. So anyone that has this type of headline needs to be up to something. We think of the headline as like your brain capacity. Okay, and the longer the headline is, the more you think about things, the more that you have to think about everything through, versus someone who has a short headline and it can be very black and white. So you have to take everything into account. And so with this headline, you need to be up to something important, complicated, big, important, and complicated. Otherwise, you'll end up in tangled webs. So it's like your brain needs something to really grapple with. It's like a supercomputer. You've ever seen 2001: Space Odyssey, the HAL 9000?
Okay.
So that's what it's called. That's what your headline is called. So, yeah. So if you don't have the brain, it's not working up with something, some big project, or something that you're immersed in, it's going to create tiny, tangled webs everywhere. I know a woman who has the same headline, and when she's using it, she does public speaking and stuff like that. She's doing great. She's on fire. But when she's not, it's like she'll get in little arguments with people, stuff like drama will happen. It's just, she has a different hand shape than you, but she'll just attract all this drama into her life, and it'll just be like, that is like, because her brain needs something to grapple with. It needs something to like use its full capacity, and so when it doesn't have a project to kind of pour itself onto, it's like, I'm going to find this person to argue with, or I'm going to find, you know, something that's wrong with this person, or something's wrong with me, or so it can go into over hypercritical kind of mode. So with being in School of Love, you know, it is to tap into your emotions, to kind of feel, display, and communicate a wide range of emotions, not just happiness, sadness, not just the easy emotions that are easy to express. You're meant to go below the depths of what most people feel and really be able to communicate what you're feeling in the emotional moment appropriately. So, you know, it's easy, you know, sometimes the survival mechanism that happens is that people will mask a more shallow emotion or mask a deeper emotion with a more shallow one. Like, oh, I guess I'm a little pissed off, when you're like, I'm fucking angry. So how can you be in your emotional system and really honor what's going on without getting overwhelmed? So I kind of wrote, there's like these kind of 4 different stages for this. So there's like, you know, an emotional reaction. You're going to be spending a lot of time dealing with emotions, a lot of emotions that are, you know, beneath the surface. Like I feel like when people are not in School of Love, they have a certain level of emotions that they can express. But when you're in School of Love, you are meant to express like all the emotions. You're meant to express and feel them, and be able to communicate with them while you're feeling it. So on one extreme, you might see someone who, you know, turns into a basket case. You know, they become overwhelmed with emotions. They don't know how to express it. They start telling everyone off the street how they feel. And that's not the goal of this. You're meant to, you know, find how your emotional system works so that you can authentically express it to the person you need to be expressing it to at that moment completely. So the thing is, the survival mechanisms that happen, I wrote down, you know, avoidance, blame, denial, hiding out, overreaction, procrastination, going numb, masking a deeper feeling with a shallower one. So just being conscious of what you're feeling is a big step. You know, opening the heart, making relationships a matter of importance. So, you know, relationships are going to be the key of this. It's going to be central to also being part of your soul psychology. And it could be just certain arenas call out for attention, like you do well in relationships except for around money issues, or you shut down around your father or mother or a certain person. But dealing with these really complex emotions is central to your life. So this is kind of like the breakthrough. So you sound and look like a person who's feeling what you're feeling, and you must deal with the overexpression of something and the underexpression of something. You know, most people stuff the feelings and then express it at a later time, and then it comes out full force. Right. So how can you express that in the moment, you know, and really communicate it to the person? Being able to register any and all emotions. So you can feel it at the moment, and, you know, if there's anyone that you need to kind of talk to kind of free your heart, you know, who would that be? If there's one person, or, you know, that you need to clean the slate, you know, end the karma, whatever, that's also really important to do for you. So, we kind of combine the big shot with the emotional aspect, the School of Love. You know, the challenge is going to be, because you're, you know, being in your head as a HAL 9000 supercomputer brain, it's like, how do you be in your body as well? You know, because the brain wants to be doing stuff. It wants to be creating things, tangible, measurable results, but how can you also balance the authenticity of expressing yourself in the moment completely? Okay, I'm going to look at your life lesson. So you have a very interesting life lesson. It's the least common one, actually. It's called the reluctant shaman. And it combines left Saturn, left Apollo, and left Mercury. So, reluctant shaman is kind of an interesting one because you guys are meant to kind of transcend the different realms of consciousness, the different layers of perception, and kind of go beyond, the mundane. So I kind of wrote, what did I write here? Okay, yeah. So, if you think about the shaman's like the second most important person in the village, right? There's the chief and then there's the shaman. The shaman actually lives on the peripheral of the village, right? You're kind of the shaman's only called in when he needs to, get a vision or something. He has to open up their body to visions, to peyote, to, receiving guidance and stuff like that. So you're kind of like second. It's like a person that's like second in command. Let me just get my pages correct. 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, you're like second in command of the chief. So I also noticed because you also have an arch in the Venus area, and the Venus is all about being of the senses. You could say it's like wine, women, and song. Connoisseur comes to mind with people that have the Venus, and also because there's a big area of your hand too. It's sensual energy. It's creative energy, and it's also about how a baby, they're like exploring their body and stuff like that, and it's like they're curious, and it's like you have that same level of curiosity with your body, with your senses. It could mean trying new foods, new wines, cigars, sexuality. It could be, I knew someone that had the same thing that was in a very polyamorous relationship, or was really into tantra. And combining the sexuality, sensuality with the spirituality. So it's you kind of think I always kind of compare it to like, it's like a baby, and they're comfortable in their body, they feel what they feel, they're exploring their body. So it's kind of like having that kind of like curiosity of the senses, they'll like stick things in their mouth or something, so it's like having, exploring their world that way. And because you have the reluctant shaman, it's going to be, again, how can you kind of be comfortable with your body to kind of give it up to whatever needs, to the visions, to the guidance. You are basically a magician, right? You're able to kind of see things that most people wouldn't normally see. You're that person that, you'll have the dreams and the feelings, the gut feelings, and you're kind of meant to kind of speak up about it. And when it's a reluctant shaman, it's like you don't trust that you have this power. You don't trust that you're meant to kind of transcend between the different realms and access this, ancient wisdoms or, wisdoms of the past. So, it combines basically the healer with the mentor. So it's like becoming a teacher and a role model for self-awareness practitioners. So you're kind of meant to be the role model for the healers in the world. So yeah, I wrote Masters of the Twilight Zones between real and unreal, leading journeys, chanting, accessing wisdoms from long ago. And first, a lot of people have to do is they have to explore the zone of false self-awareness, and that could be like you join a cult, you work for someone that preys on people's fears for snake oil sales. So it's kind of like you have to kind of go the opposite direction to kind of figure out, oh, it's not like that actually, before you kind of realize that you do have, you are a magician. You're basically capable of anything. And then how much is under your conscious control and how much is not? This could mean, altering people's experiences of their reality, performing magic feats like accomplishing an insurmountable goal, or, imbuing a friend with positive vibes when there's something tragic going on. So the more lost and, traumatized someone is, the more you're kind of able to dive in deep and kind of know what to do. So it's, being able to access these different dimensions, levels of consciousness, and then through that connection, bringing a person back to their wholeness. So you are a healer. You're a healer, but you also have the part of the mentor. So kind of, it's kind of like looking at your own self. And that's also where that, I want to point out, because of the Jupiter finger, is it's part of your life lesson. And so Jupiter is all about, on the negative side, it can kind of show up as judgmentalness. So a good word for Saturn finger is, being able to receive, being able to kind of trust that you do have this ability. Let me see both your hands. Okay.
I can take this one.
Oh, okay.
The other one's not.
Yeah, because I kind of noticed it was a little bowed out. Did you notice that? Yeah, what was that from?
One finger is broken. One of my pinky fingers.
Okay.
I can't remember which one. Yeah, that's. It seems more pronounced in this one, maybe.
Yeah, I actually saw it.
Because of the ring.
And I actually saw that in both of the hands. Actually, a little bit bowed on both of the hands. Which is kind of an interesting, because it shows up as the storyteller. And it can show up as being kind of an exaggeration, the exaggerator. Like when you tell the story, it's like you don't feel heard, so the story keeps escalating, like the fish keeps getting bigger and bigger each time you tell it. And then you believe that the story is, every time you exaggerate the story, it's like you are kind of believing it. Okay, the fish was this big. No, it was actually this big. No, it was this big. And so it's like, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. So it's like good news and bad news. So, it's like you're really good at like drawing people in, right? And it's also what you're kind of putting out there, you're attracting back. So it's like, okay, I made $1 million last year. And no, it was $2 million. And so you're kind of putting it out there, you're going to get that back. But it also can show up as, this person did this to me and it was so bad. And maybe it wasn't that bad, but maybe you registered it and like, oh no, they did this and it was this horrible. So it can also create more of that exaggerated stuff coming back to you. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing, because it depends on how you're kind of using it. You are a storyteller, and Mercury finger is all about communication. So, it can be used for positive. If you have a vision and what you see, and it keeps getting better and better and better, it's like you're going to draw people in. It's going to get more exciting. At the same time, because Saturn is also part of your life lesson, it can kind of show up as, it happened, it was a lot worse than it actually was. And that story that you tell yourself can get worse and worse and worse, and then you're kind of giving all your power away to that experience or to that person. So yeah, I said, negative Saturn, this is part of the life lesson, learning how to receive, and it can also show up as kind of criticalness of not only yourself but also others. And it's because you feel that people are hypercritical of yourself, so then you tend to, the tendency is to be critical of other people. So we call this, there's kind of let me see your hands again. Yeah, so this kind of, this is, the Saturn figure kind of has a little bit kind of shaved off of it. I kind of noticed that. Is that anything? Just, okay. Well, we call it a druid's cap. So when it's on the left-hand Saturn, so it kind of basically diminishes the capacity for Saturn. Saturn, can be about money, structure, finances, agreements, and stuff like that, self-worth. So it's an ivory tower zone. So it's kind of like when you're living, I wrote down, it's like when you're living in an ivory tower, and so the workers below you are kind of building the moat, and you've actually never been outside of your moat, but you're telling them how to build the moat.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't have the experience, but you're like, you have the book experience, but you don't have the physical experience. So what that basically says is, can you get out there and get your hands dirty and, help build the moat instead of just being in the ivory tower and saying how they should be building it. Okay, part of your life purpose is big shot, so you're meant to call the shots, but part of it is also like getting your hands dirty, not insulating yourself with your book smarts. Like, oh, I know how to do that. Just do that, and put the nail right there, and then do that. Versus like actually doing it yourself. Yeah, so it can also show up, as a hypercriticalness of others, and because of the HAL 9000, it's like you expect a lot, right? It's like most people don't have this type of headline, so people are not going to be able to keep up with you. It's like they're, I say, the 2 presidents ago, Obama had the same headline. Okay, he's the president of the United States. HAL 9000 makes sense, right? So that's the capacity that I'm talking about for the HAL 9000. It needs to be big, important, and complicated. But also, being aware that, it can keep you in your head. When people have long headlines like this, it's like, oh, are they going to be too much in their head? Can they, because hand analysis is actually scientific. It's actually, it's not just ancient palmistry. It combines ancient palmistry, but it also has the scientific part of the fingerprints in it, which makes it kind of different. Because you're School of Love, so it's all about being in the body, and also the arch in the Venus area is, how can you, express your sensual nature, express your sexuality, being of your senses, opening your body up for, as a shaman, for communication to come through. But you have to be comfortable enough with it, with experiencing that. I saw a shamanic, have you done any shamanic things before? Okay. Well, I've seen it happen. I haven't, there was one time I did it at Burning Man. I don't know how accurate that was, the shamanic experience, but I know it's like the drumming and the chanting, and, you're kind of going down the tunnel, going past all these different layers of reality, and bringing the person, their energy back to them, calling back their, bringing back to them back to wholeness. And so you have to kind of be like a vessel and let your body kind of, whatever happens. I know that the one shaman was he was coughing up this energy and stuff. And I think one time he was throwing up because of the purging the bad toxins of the, of whatever he was experiencing. So let's see how we're doing. Okay. Yeah, so when I kind of put this all together, being in School of Love, expressing yourself, being able to express a whole range of emotions, and also being the big shot, setting high standards for yourself and risking failure to meet those standards, and also with a reluctant shaman, being able to give up your body as like a vessel. How can you kind of put that all together so it kind of creates something that's, that's kind of like a life purpose map? Because remember, you have to kind of step up in your life lesson you have to kind of baby steps up in your life lesson in order to really address the life purpose. And a lot of the life lesson is believing that you are a vessel, believing that you are capable of this magic, of being able to kind of, bring people back to wholeness. And, you're supposed to be you're meant to live on the peripheral. You're not meant to kind of be, like I read another person whose life purpose was the shaman. And they were like, really came out. It was like they wanted to kind of stay in their house. They never wanted to come out. They never wanted to leave. And that was kind of part of the life purpose. It was like, unless he had a really good reason to leave the house, he would just stay there and do his spiritual work. So you're kind of meant to be on the peripheral, when you're kind of called, you're meant to fully show up and bring everything, and surrender yourself to the healing process. You also have what we call a know-it-all thumb.
I don't like the sound of that.
Well, remember there's always good news and bad news for this. So the know-it-all thumb, they tend to have a lot of information. It could be, ancient knowledge, just, it could just be that they do know a lot, right? And the bad news side of it is that they can kind of use it to kind of like, what's the word? Let's see, I wrote it down. Okay, so it can be, like the moat, you're in the ivory tower in the moat, and you're kind of telling people what to do while being up at the very top. So kind of, being on the surface or kind of being in people's faces about what you know, and risk adverse. So not taking risks, and it can kind of show up as being insecure about being wrong. Yeah, it's kind of related to the School of Wisdom. School of Wisdom is another school that you guys are very have a lot of information, and you tend to be the observers, right? So it's less of the challenge with this is that is actually putting yourself at stake. Is like being a participant rather than just being on the outskirts of everything. I mean, your life lesson is to be on the outskirts. But your life purpose is very much like big shot, big results in the world. You're meant to kind of tell people how it's supposed to be done. So I can see a challenge with that is bringing yourself enough courage in order to kind of, we call them like life's diving boards. So like whenever you need to make a decision, it's like jumping off a diving board. And it could seem like it's a high dive situation, like, changing careers or asking the girl on a date or moving somewhere. It could be like decisions that you have to make. And are you going to stay frozen on the diving board? Are you going to be paralyzed by fear? Or do you jump off diving boards like without even looking, making choices? Some people will think like, they'll be doing like, I watched a movie called Moreau, and it was like they're climbing these gigantic like vertical mountains. Yeah. Have you seen that movie? Oh, it was amazing. It's really, it's like one of the tallest mountains in India. And so that would be an example of like where you're putting yourself at risk, but it's not an emotional risk. And with you being in School of Love, it's like, putting yourself at risk in a way that leaves you nowhere to hide. So it's kind of like putting yourself out there in an emotional risk way, rather than like, oh, look at me, I'm, climbing these mountains, I'm surfing these giant waves, I'm scuba diving with the sharks. I am taking risks, right? And that's more kind of like an adrenaline kind of risk. Whereas the risk that I'm talking about here is more of like the stuff that you're resisting. Is there, like, if there's someone, like when I go back to the School of Love, kind of talking about, is there anyone that you need to talk to free your heart? Well, the person that you're most in resistance to, that's usually the person that you need to talk to and kind of come to emotional terms with. So yeah, so that's kind of, on the plus side, it's like you do have a lot of this wisdom, you have this capacity to really kind of transcend different layers of reality, and to kind of be, in charge, being a big shot, being the head of something, being a leader of something big where people look up to you for guidance. Because you have the shaman life lesson, I'm going to say it has something to do with the spiritual realm, because and healing, because it's part of mentor and healing combined. It's the left Mercury with the left Saturn finger, and it's about trusting that you do have this ability, that you are capable of basically anything, and you have to believe it though. And getting out of the head, that's going to be the biggest challenge, is getting out of your head, getting into the body, feeling the body, exploring the body. You have the arch in the Venus area of the hand, in both of your hands. So being of the senses, can you, relinquish control, stop having to control everything, letting go, letting the body be a vessel, and trusting what your body has to say. Yeah, because the biggest challenge will be this HAL 9000. Because it's you see HAL 9000, it's like, okay, supercomputer brain. This is going to be challenging. No, it's good though, because you can think about many different things. Multitasking is something that you guys can do. You guys can think about many different things, and you need to. It's like part of what you need to do, multitasking. Right. That's how you're wired. But yeah, you kind of see it's kind of like a delicious dilemma. It's kind of like, okay, you got the supercomputer brain, but also you need to kind of trust and surrender and be in the body enough that you can allow your body to be a vessel. And also, authentically express yourself without, it's like the head and the heart, sometimes with the HAL 9000, it's like you'll think a feeling and feel a thought. So it's like where the head and the heart kind of get a little confused. Or you try to analyze your emotions. I think, or I feel it's like turning an emotion into a thought kind of a thing. So, yeah, that's probably, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge that I see in your hand. But I see some really cool things like that, because you do have the exaggerator, so it's like the storyteller really using that. I could see you using that with the shaman aspect. You're with your visions more so, and it can be very captivating with your audiences, with the people that you're working with. So, yeah, I think that kind of sums up everything. It kind of sums up the gist of the reading. Do you have any questions?
I see a conflict with the big shot and the shaman.
How so?
Because the shaman is more of a peripheral person, and also just kind of like a support. He's not the chief.
Right.
He is a support to the chief.
Yeah.
But he's really not calling the shots.
Right,
He's kind of under the direction of somebody else. And I see myself as more that way.
On the peripheral?
There are some aspects that I could see myself in a leadership position, but I tend to resist the leadership roles. I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want people looking at me. But I resonate much more with the shaman.
The shaman. Okay. Yeah. Well, we can also see the big shot as because you also have very earthy hands, and the earthy hands are also kind of results oriented. There's a little bit of water in the hand, and water is emotions, and it's not enough water in your hand to say that you are Lady of the Lake. It doesn't matter which.
What does water in the hand mean?
So because you have longer fingers, so it's like there's elements of earth, and there's a little bit of water in your hand. So earth, you think about the tangible, measurable results. So it fits the life purpose. Usually when I see Lady of the Lake on a guy's hands, it's like a stay-at-home dad. Very nurturing time. Okay, that makes sense then.
Dad
Oh, okay.
for about 8 years.
Oh, wow. And how did that resonate with you? You loved it. Okay.
Absolutely
Okay.
loved it, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I wrote that down here too because I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, it looks more earthy, but there is some water in the hand. But yeah, so this
Yeah,
would be
I'm very parental, very nurturing, like
yeah.
very into my kids.
Right. So I wrote nurturing, caring, nurse, body worker, gardener at the convent, kind of a motherly type of energy, stay-at-home dad. The challenge is because it's water and earth that it can become muddy waters. So
Yeah.
difficult relationships,
Right.
unclear path about life. So the challenge is that you guys tend to attract partners that are very difficult. And a lot depends on the partner that you choose. But can you harness the mudslide energy? So it's like the earth and the water, because mudslides can take out whole villages, right? So it's like when you harness that energy, or else you're going to be stuck in the mud with a bunch of bozos. Your opposite is going to be the fire air type, so the illuminator. And the challenge is also, can you muster the energy to do stuff? Right? Because earth is very much of a doer, the water is not. Water is like intuitive, imagination, sensitive. So how can you muster the energy to like complete stuff? I know a couple people who are Lady of the Lake hand types, and sometimes they'll be just sitting at the computer all day, like on Facebook, and they'll just be. I know the one woman, she's always had trouble with relationships, like gotten really abusive relationships, or they'll tend to like cheat on her. So a lot of it depends on which partner they're choosing. That can be very, very tricky. But yeah, you guys are kind of like it's like, well, why is this world so noisy? You just want to be a healer. You want to take care of everyone. So it's kind of, it's like, how can you find peace and quiet on this noisy planet? that's the challenge for this hand type. Okay, cool. I'm glad I asked about that. Yeah, because it was like earth and there's a little bit of water. So nurturing, stay-at-home dad type. Yeah, the big shot, if you think about like standards that you're setting up for yourself, what goals are you trying to reach that are like tangible and measurable? It could be something that has to do with relationships, because you are a school of love. So, creating a relationship, creating something that's a partnership or something. Or something that has to do with relationships, maybe a like foster care home or something where you're working with like children, that using that nurturing energy, taking care of people. So yeah, I mean, big shot. It doesn't have to mean like this all or none thing again. It's how are you setting standards for yourself that you're putting yourself at risk to put yourself out there in a way where you're seeing measurable results. I mean, taking care of your kid, that's definitely, school of love, expressing yourself, having to deal with difficult emotions too, remember, all the range of emotions are supposed to happen. That's something you will not stop doing, is grappling with all of the emotions. Anger, sadness, fear, delight, grief, rage, everything is up for grabs there. Okay, well, you relate more to the shaman type. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is your life lesson. It is what you came here to work on. And it could be like getting your hands dirty part, getting into the experience, feeling your body, as part of that next step. So, yeah. Anything else? Any other questions or anything?
There's a lot to think about.
Okay, well, you had a recording, so you can listen to it again.
And I could see how somebody of a similar type there's like a wide range of, like, you could be a professor. The ivory tower thing is more of like, you could be judgmental. You could be looking down on people in a
Yeah.
way. You could use your intellect in that way, or you could use your big shot that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But combined with all these other, the earth and the water, the Venus part,
Right. It's like
the shaman part. It's like there's some variation in the in the actual application.
Right. So it doesn't matter
But
so
I don't
much
want
what
to
you're
be cerebral.
Right,
I want
right,
to connect
right.
with people.
Exactly.
I don't want to be the ivory
Relationships.
tower.
Relationships.
Ivory tower to me is disconnected from people,
Oh yeah.
and it's judgmental. And I don't want those things.
That's true. So, analysis can be very pinpoint specific, but it's not so much the format that you choose to like whatever you do, but it's like these are different elements that you're going to find meaning in if you kind of, if you're able to embody this consciousness. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in these hands, so a lot to think about. But what I would do next is start to track it. Where do you see the lady of the lake? How does that show up? The nurturing part of yourself, the part that wants to take care of everyone, and you want to heal the planet. You want to take care of all the wounded cats, dogs, animals. It's a noisy planet for you guys. And then where does the big shot step? Where do you kind of track that? And then your life purpose.
I could see the mentoring aspect maybe as being the big shot. In the shamanic,
results in the world.
Shamanic way that I'm having maybe an audience of younger men that are kind of looking up to me in a way. I can handle that.
Okay.
I don't really like to be like the important person.
Well, yeah, your thumbs aren't really.
It's easier to be a follower than a leader for me.
Right,
I'm much more
right.
comfortable in that emotion.
In that second position.
Like it's too much of a risk to put myself out there like I'm the guy that knows what's going on because I have too much doubt.
Right. Well,
I really know what's going
that's
on.
part of your life lesson too, is the doubt part. So
Yeah.
self-worth, judgment, allowing yourself to believe, receive. Receive. That's going to be a word for you, or a mantra. I allow myself to receive, because that's a Saturn word. Usually it's judgmental, critical, that can show up in, low self-worth, low self-esteem. That shows up with the Saturn life lesson.
Right.
So just track those things. Start to see, okay, it's my life lesson is talking right now and saying that, I'm not good enough to do this, or I don't deserve this, or who am I to believe in these visions and stuff like that. Just start to notice it, because when you start to notice it, it has less of a unconscious kind of pushing you in a certain direction. So, yeah. All right, so, yeah. Let me just give you a next step. I always like to give a next step. So, I see your next step has it's like a blue color. I'm seeing you eating a very delicious piece of cake and really savoring each bite. And that has to do with the Venusian thing, I think. So just really savoring, being Venusian about stuff. Wearing, it could be wearing clothing that feels good on your skin. Eating foods that taste good and that make you feel good. So yeah.
No problem.
Awesome.
No problem in that department.
That's what I was seeing. Okay, we'll stop it right there.